Welcome to another edition of Quick Picks with Just Facts Combat. This week, we're covering the full card of the highly anticipated matchup between Garry and Carlos Prates. Kicking off the action is Chelsea Chandler versus Joselyne Edwards, and the way I see it, I've got Edwards taking this one. Striking-wise, I see Joselyne Edwards putting on a clinic against Chandler, who has shown very little defensive awareness. Aside from literally running from Dumont, Chandler hasn't demonstrated the ability to deal with a volume striker like Edwards. I expect Edwards to pick her apart on the feet and stay out of range to avoid sloppy takedown attempts, which Chandler will likely resort to out of desperation, often charging in without setting them up. This dynamic should play out over 3 rounds, with Edwards clearly outlanding her and controlling the pace. As is often the case in women's MMA, a finish seems unlikely, but I expect a dominant showing from Edwards on the scorecards. Final prediction: Joselyne Edwards via decision. Stylistically, this is a tough matchup for Cuamba. He's up against another physically imposing opponent, possibly the most aggressive pressure fighter he's faced yet, who boasts sharp boxing and enough grappling ability to hold his own. Cuamba does have the edge in hand speed, but his strikes lack power, which means Romero likely won't respect his range and will walk him down. Cuamba's backfoot style is sound in theory, looking to bait opponents into counters, but the execution isn't there. He frequently drops his hands, absorbs shots he means to counter, and only resorts to wrestling when he's forced to. He also struggles with volume, giving Romero even more room to dictate pace. I expect Romero to pressure relentlessly, landing clean until either the ref steps in or Cuamba absorbs too much punishment to continue. Romero might test his wrestling early, but once he sees how effective his striking is, he may not need it. Overall, this feels like a bad spot for Cuamba, possibly even a setup to usher him out of the UFC. A loss here would mark his 3rd straight, and while the short notice fight against Oki earned him some goodwill, 2 consecutive defeats in his natural weight class won't help his case. Final pick: Roberto Romero via TKO, round 1 or 2, or a dominant decision. At its core, this is a striker versus grappler matchup, but with a twist. While Viana is known for her striking, she has decent takedown defense and can grapple when needed. On the flip side, Amorim, primarily a grappler, doesn't look uncomfortable on the feet and has serviceable striking. That blend of skills makes this a closer fight than the odds suggest. Viana also has more experience at a higher level, so this isn't a soft step up for Amorim. That said, I'm still siding with Amorim. Her grappling is her biggest weapon, and I believe it's enough to either finish Viana or at least control the fight. She's a fast starter and extremely dangerous early, especially once she gets into dominant grappling positions. Viana can grapple, but her defensive grappling is suspect, and if Amorim gets her down early, I see a strong chance of a first-round finish. Viana's takedown defense is decent but not enough to stop Amorim for long, especially in the first 5 minutes. Since her loss to Sam Hughes, Amorim has shown better cardio management, and even if she doesn't get the sub in round 1, I expect her to keep the pressure into the second. Viana can make it competitive by stuffing takedowns and using her striking, but her inactivity and long layoff, a year and a half, are concerns. Amorim has been more active and appears to have the better gas tank at this point in their careers. I see her eventually trapping Viana, taking her down, and working toward a finish. Final prediction: Jaquline Amorim via submission, round 1 or 2, or decision. This is a tough fight to call, as both fighters share similar styles and weaknesses that can play into each other's strengths. Still, there are some key differences to note. Saaiman is the more aggressive of the two, throwing higher volume and showing a willingness to fight off the back foot when needed. He's also the more battle-tested fighter. However, his aggression often leaves him open, especially when blitzing forward, which has cost him before, most notably in his loss to Peyton Talbot where he was dropped multiple times and finished. Wellmaker, in contrast, is more technical and composed. He usually fights off the back foot but applies smart pressure to create counter opportunities. He doesn't throw much, but he's accurate, powerful, and has solid size for the division. His takedown defense is strong, and while his offensive wrestling isn't a major part of his game, he mixes in counters well when opponents initiate grappling. If Saaiman can use his speed and aggression to land and then exit the pocket quickly, he can outwork Wellmaker, especially given Malcolm's lower volume. However, those same blitzes leave him exposed, and I expect Wellmaker to capitalize with sharp counters. Saaiman may also attempt to mix in grappling, but Wellmaker has shown solid takedown defense and tends to control those exchanges well enough to avoid serious danger. Ultimately, I think Wellmaker will land the cleaner, more damaging shots and neutralize Saaiman's offense, similar to Talbot, but with less volume, which makes a finish less likely. Final prediction: Wellmaker via decision or TKO. Not a confident pick though. I wouldn't be surprised if Saaiman outworks him and edges a win. Alateng Heili has a solid chance to pull off the upset here. While he's coming off a year-long layoff, Blackshear is making a quick turnaround after fighting just 3 weeks ago, so Heili may actually be the fresher fighter, and that could play a role. Stylistically, however, I think the fight favors Blackshear. Heili often fights at kicking range, giving opponents space, which usually helps him set up counters or wrestling entries. But against a dynamic kicker like Blackshear, that space works against him. Blackshear can chip away from the outside with kicks and use his Muay Thai in close if Heili tries to close the distance. Heili's biggest weapon is his wrestling, and that could be a real problem for Blackshear. As a jiu-jitsu specialist, Blackshear tends to stay on his back when taken down and has struggled to work back to his feet against strong wrestlers. I can see Heili securing takedowns and controlling position for long stretches. However, in today's judging climate, control without damage doesn't always win rounds, especially if Blackshear is more active on the feet and off his back. Heili doesn't throw much volume and prefers to stalk, which could allow Blackshear to outwork him. Even from bottom, Blackshear stays busy and may do enough to sway the judges if Heili doesn't land significant ground and pound. A submission is possible, but unlikely, as Heili is a seasoned grappler and should be able to defend well. Still, Heili has the tools to win this with smart wrestling or even land a big shot. He has respectable power despite his low output. At nearly plus 400, he's a live underdog and shouldn't be overlooked. That said, I'm siding with Blackshear to edge this out with volume, movement, and activity. Final pick, Damon Blackshear via decision or submission. Hopefully this fight finally happens, as it's already been rescheduled once and now moved up to featherweight. In this matchup between Gutierrez and John Castaneda, I see Gutierrez as the more effective and composed fighter. While Gutierrez isn't known for high output and could lose rounds based on volume alone, his excellent range management and punishing leg kicks should keep Castaneda's aggression in check. I also give Gutierrez the edge in cardio and fight IQ. He follows a more calculated game plan, whereas Castaneda tends to rely on overwhelming opponents and struggles when that doesn't work. Castaneda may look to mix in takedowns, but Gutierrez's takedown defense is strong enough to neutralize that threat. I expect Castaneda's lead leg to take a lot of damage as he rarely checks kicks, and once his movement is compromised, his volume-heavy style will start to fall apart. Final pick, Gutierrez via decision or late stoppage. With his original opponent Ahmad Hassansada pulling out, Evan Elder now faces Gage Young, a fighter with a very similar style. Both like to control the center, pick shots from range, and mix in grappling while staying ready to counter on the back foot. Expect fiery pocket exchanges early, as both carry legit fight-ending power. That said, the circumstances strongly favor Elder. Young is stepping in on just 4 days' notice, likely without a full camp or optimal conditioning. On top of that, he's already shown signs of inexperience and cardio issues, having never won a fight that went deep. Elder, by contrast, comes in on a full camp and with momentum. Even in his 2 losses, he's looked sharp, taking a short-notice fight against Parsons up a weight class, and clearly winning against Sadikov before a doctor stoppage due to a cut. Outside of those, he's been dominant. Given the prep, experience, and edge in conditioning, I see Elder taking at least 2 rounds and possibly pulling away late. Young may put up a respectable fight, but this is a steep challenge on short notice, even for someone with his talent. Final prediction, Evan Elder via decision or late TKO. This feels like a do-or-die matchup for both fighters, each on a losing streak and possibly fighting to keep their jobs. It's unfortunate, considering both are talented, but that's the reality. Both are strong grapplers, but Flick has the edge in that department, as grappling is his bread and butter. Schnell is a more technical striker but lacks volume, much like Flick, so expect some slower moments between the grappling exchanges. The key difference is how they generate offense. Flick uses his striking to set up takedowns, while Schnell prefers a slower-paced striking battle. That plays into Flick's hands, as Schnell won't throw enough volume to keep him at bay. I expect Flick to close the distance consistently and force Schnell to defend takedowns throughout. Schnell has, at times, welcomed grappling exchanges, but doing that against a high-level submission threat like Flick would be a mistake. He'll likely aim to keep it standing, but I don't see him doing enough to stop Flick from implementing his game. Defensively, Flick has shown he can stay composed under fire, whereas Schnell has taken a lot of damage in past fights. That could be the deciding factor here. Unless Schnell catches Flick with a clean counter or a slick triangle, which he's known for, I see Flick grinding him out, getting the fight to the mat, and either securing a late submission or cruising to a clear decision. Final prediction, Jimmy Flick via submission, round 2 or 3, or decision. This should be a solid bounce-back win for Ikram Aliskerov after that brutal KO loss in his title run. At this stage of his career, I don't see Muniz posing much of a threat. I expect Aliskerov to finish him in the second or third round. The only hesitation would be if Aliskerov holds back due to caution from his last loss. If he's too hesitant to open up, it could lead to a decision win rather than a finish. Still, Aliskerov has the better striking, better wrestling, and overall fundamentals. Muniz's defense is poor, worse than Aliskerov's, and his striking lacks polish. If Aliskerov sticks to his usual approach, he should be able to pick Muniz apart and get the finish. A decision is possible if he fights cautiously, but given his experience and ability to bounce back, I think he'll respond well. Final pick, Ikram Aliskerov via TKO, round 2 or 3, or a decision. This should be a fun back-and-forth scrap, but I'm siding with the younger, more dynamic Randy Brown. Dalby is tough and gritty but looks to be past his prime. While he can mix in pressure and clinch work to slow Brown down, I think Brown's range control and speed will be too much. Dalby may find success holding Brown against the cage, something that has worked against Brown in the past, but I don't see him being able to sustain it or do enough damage. Brown should be able to circle out, reset, and pick Dalby apart at range. A finish is possible. Brown has the power, but Dalby is notoriously durable. I expect Brown to land the cleaner, more effective shots throughout and pull away on the scorecards. Final pick, Randy Brown via decision, TKO also live, but less likely. I expect this to be a hard-fought battle, but I'm picking Abbas to get the win. Pereira is dangerous early and will be a live threat in round 1, but I think he'll misjudge the range, overextend on a strike, and get countered or taken down. His takedown defense is shaky, and one of his flashy moves may leave him wide open for a level change. Once Abbas gets him down, I see him either dominating on the mat or quickly finding the finish. Pereira tends to gas out and accept bottom position, so whether it's a submission, ground and pound stoppage, or a rinse and repeat wrestling clinic, I see Abbas controlling the fight. Final pick, Abbas Magomedov via TKO or submission. This fight comes down to range control. Giga is at his best when he can kick freely from distance, but Onama's pressure could make that difficult. Without space, Giga will have to work twice as hard to get his offense off. He does have fast hands and respectable power, so expect him to try picking Onama off from the outside, but Onama is skilled at cutting off the cage and forcing close range exchanges, where he's most dangerous. Giga has shown questionable cardio when forced into high-paced fights, and I think Onama will exploit that by constantly pressing forward and mixing in takedowns, not necessarily to dominate on the ground, but to wear Giga down and keep the tempo high. While Giga has solid takedown defense, the real threat is the pace itself. If Giga starts to fade, Onama could get a late finish, but more likely, I see him grinding out a clear decision win. Final pick, David Onama via TKO or decision. This is how the UFC thanks Anthony Smith for over a decade of service. Unfortunately, leaving Dana's good graces, regardless of past loyalty, often comes with cold treatment. Smith's situation isn't unique, but it's still disappointing to see. Now, cutting straight to the prediction, this will likely be longer than the fight itself. Smith is being set up to lose here. He's facing a dangerous, rising contender in Zhang Mingyang, and I honestly don't see a path to victory for him. Based on his last performance, Smith looked like a man just there to collect a check. He didn't fight with urgency or desire, and I expect even less resistance this time around. I see Smith attempting a desperate takedown early, but Zhang likely stuffs it and pours on the damage until the ref steps in. Zhang should get this done quickly, within the first 2 rounds, possibly even the first. Hopefully, the referee is merciful and doesn't let Smith absorb unnecessary punishment. Final prediction, Zhang Mingyang by TKO under 2 rounds, likely inside 2.5. This is another close matchup, but as always, we're making the call. Prates is a serious threat to Garry. He carries the kind of power most of Garry's past opponents lacked. If Garry gets clipped the way he did against Song Keenan, Prates is more than capable of capitalizing and finishing the job. We've seen Garry hurt before in the UFC, but he typically recovers through smart grappling. That's something Prates will need to overcome if he wants the finish. However, if Prates can stuff the takedowns, he'll find opportunities. Garry's defense outside of range management and occasional head movement isn't the strongest. When hurt, he's very hittable. That said, Garry is far more tested. He's faced tougher competition and is more well-rounded. He has more tools to work with here. If he can use his speed, combos, and range to keep Prates at bay, potentially baiting Prates into overcommitting, he could set up takedowns and control the pace, which seems more in line with his actual game plan, despite the knockout talk he's been pushing this week. Prates won't be unprepared though. He trains with solid grapplers at Fighting Nerds, so I expect him to be more ready for this than people assume. While I believe Garry will eventually get him down and frustrate him, it won't be easy at first. I see Garry establishing control as the fight progresses, slowing Prates down. If Garry can win the first 2 rounds through control and pressure, it'll be hard for Prates to find that one big KO shot late, especially since we haven't seen Prates tested in a 5-round war. His cardio might not hold up if the fight turns into a grappling grind. All things considered, I'm leaning toward Garry. If he survives the early storm and manages to implement his grappling, I see him taking over late. Still, I'm not overly confident. If Prates can stuff the takedowns and land clean early, Garry could get finished. But my pick is Garry via decision, or possibly a late submission if Prates overextends while trying to get back to his feet. Final pick, Garry via decision or late submission.